Afternoon, gang. The weekend is upon us. I hope you're having a belter of a Saturday so far. It has been a busy one by all accounts. Lots of counterparts in the industry having lots of inspections, be it sales or rentals, which is absolutely wonderful. Great to see that the industry is alive and kicking, very much so. Gang, it is Saturday, the 18th of July. I sincerely hope that you are well. I am your host, Andy, and this is Ask Andy Anything, and you can literally ask me anything. I've had some weird and wonderful questions getting asked to me over the course of the last few days. A lot of them, I hate to say it, a little bit blue. They're a little bit risky, so I can't answer some of them publicly, unfortunately, but they're very, very funny all the same. So at least we get a bit of a laugh between us, all right? The whole point of this, gang, is just to try and maintain connection amongst the real estate community, making sure that you guys all feel that you're not the only ones out there right now. And also the fact that if you do have any concerns, you do have channels through which you can voice them. If you do have any issues or problems that you're really struggling to overcome, that's what we're here for, gang. Myself and other leaders in the real estate space, we are all here to help each other crack on. But I sincerely hope that a lot of you are too busy to watch this on a Saturday afternoon because you're too busy rocking and rolling with some sales and some rentals. So, gang, we've got a couple of questions, and they're very technically real estate-y, okay? So we do offer the platform up to mental health, and thank you so much to all the feedback that I got from the last video, which was all around the mental health side of things. How do you pick yourself up when you're really struggling? If you want to have a look at that, check the episode that happened yesterday. I opened my own experiences up with mental health, and hopefully by sharing, you guys might have got some benefit out of that. So feel free to jump onto yesterday's episode for that. These two, though, these are very, very real estate focused in terms of the questions we've had today. We'll keep it relatively short and sweet. Mickey Wood, my top fan, has joined us. I'm sure he's going to ask me something about my hair at some point. Mate, I actually went for a little bit more volume today, so hopefully that's satisfactory. Michael Wood, Marshall White, one of the best auctioneers in Victoria, by the way, and a top dude to boot. So let us rock and roll, gang, with our first question, which is all around paid advertising. So this is on the sales side, guys. So the question that's been posed to me is, I'm struggling to get vendors to agree to paid advertising right now. How can I go about it differently? I'm struggling to get vendors to agree to paid advertising right now. How can I go about it differently? Paid advertising for me. So when VPA or vendor paid advertising came into my area, so we were very much a no sale, no fee suburb until I think it was sort of like 2011, 2012. And so we were part of that transition from no sale, no charge to or office paid advertising to VPA. And the way that a lot of agents, because I've obviously seen and heard a lot of different agents over the journey with respect to how they go about their vendor paid advertising. And for me, and both of these questions are all about the word perspective, by the way, gang. They are all about the word perspective. With regards to this one, what you need to understand, aside from COVID or anything else, vendors are trying to make sure that they get the most amount of money for the least amount of spend. That is just human nature. Not one vendor on this planet will want to just go spend money like there's no tomorrow because they've decided to sell their house. It's a fact. Even if they've got squillions of dollars in the skyrocket, they're not going to want to spend unless they really need to. So right now, a lot of agents and a lot of the ways that agents are being trained to sell VPA it's all being done under the perspective of how can the agents get more exposure? How can agents get more exposure for the property / brand? Okay, this is the big challenge, right? Because thanks, mate. Thanks for the comment, Rob. Look, some of us aren't quite as follically challenged. But anyway, so gang, when it comes to VPA, you've really got to switch your perspective and stop focusing on what's going to get the agency more brand awareness. That is one of the big problems, especially at a franchise level. Franchise groups are so keen on pushing agendas through the directors and through the front line, in my humble opinion, in a lot of cases, so that it improves their brand perception. Now, if I was a vendor, I could not give a stuff about that unless the brand was telling me that they are rubbish at their job. But what you need to understand, though, from a vendor's point of view, all they care about is, can you get more money for my house with that particular bit of VPA? And that is exactly what you need to explain. Most of the time, gang, whenever you're trying to say, so this is so symptomatic of a listing presentation. So many listing presentations to go through VPA like this. They'll say, okay, so, we need to make sure that we're across realestate.com. We'll get some really good photos so that so your house looks really great on the internet. We'll get it on realestate.com and domain.com. And we get Premier as well. So we'll make sure it goes up on the top of the list. And so that's basically what the marketing is. Gang, there's no real explanation as to why anything is relevant for that vendor. You need to justify everything, especially now that COVID's hit and there's a lot of the vendors that need to sell right now have either lost jobs, they're worried about their jobs, or they've had, their jobs have been really tightly held, they've been really tightly brought down. So their income has been hit massively. So that's the main reason why vendors are struggling to agree to paid advertising right now. But you've got to understand that that's not their problem. That is not their fault, all right? It is not their fault. So you've got to try and do everything that you can to get them to understand and to justify why each element is relevant and pertinent and appropriate for their sale. So you've got to come up with statistics. No one can argue with logic, but you've got to put the effort into your listing presentations to actually have that logic on hand and available. Now, some people go and get the material from the likes of REA. They've got some, good material that you can custom to your own branding and what have you, and it shows the stats. But again, that is still a little bit skin deep for me with respect to getting vendors to understand why that particular spend is worthwhile. Again, you've got to put much more effort into how and why you are putting that VPA forward to vendors. There's so many agents that go with a set campaign structure that is sent to them by their directors or their franchisors, and that's what they run with. And any time that I've done a role play with a whole bunch of agents from a whole different brands in loads of different kinds of market, so many of them, as soon as I ask them about one specific thing or another, they really struggle to actually come up with a half decent answer. They really do. And a lot of that is down to the fact that they are just told, all right, this is what you're selling. This is what the VPA entails. Go out and sell it. You need to have a much better understanding than that, gang. We are paid as professionals to know and understand what we are doing. And that includes the VPA. Yes, we're primarily hired to sell homes, but these marketing components are tools for your trade. So you've got to understand how they work. Effort is what's required if you really want to understand and be able to put across that VPA wholeheartedly and with full confidence that that is right for this campaign, for this property. If you don't do that, if you are one of these agents that is running around with a schedule that's been presented to you by the director with very little explanation with respect to why this is important on REA, why that's important on domain, why professional photos are important, differences between dusk and daylight with respect to how that can affect that particular property, how much natural light is involved, is contained within the property, and how the lighting within the home from the electrical point of view, how that can all affect whether you do day or night. These are all little things that add to your credibility as a real estate professional, guys. You got to put more effort in. It's as simple as that. You got to put more effort in. You can't just go in blindly saying, right, that's the VPA because we got on realestate.com, we take professional photos, we're on domain.com, and then boards and brochures. And how many offices have got these service fees? these like $500 here or $700 there for admin or production fees or whatever the case may be. I bet you if I asked 10 agents what that entailed and if they could justify that and ask them why, 9 out of 10 couldn't tell me. No way, no chance on this planet. They'll try and fluff their way through certain tools that they pay for, which will help, blah, 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 blah. But if I'm a vendor, that's irrelevant to me. Your tools aren't the vendor's problem. Vendor's issue is wanting to advance their lives via the sale of their home. You need to justify your tools to them. They don't just need to accept it. So as soon as you get your head around the fact that you've got to work from the vendor's angle, not the real estate agent angle, because money's massive right now for people. You've got to pay more attention to that. You've got to appreciate that a lot more. All right? Like I said, even the ones who've got masses of money in their bank accounts, they're not going to want to spend money unnecessarily. So make damn sure that you can justify every single cent. That's why you got to put in the effort. If I were you, if I was an agent, and while I've got a bit more time in front of the laptop or a bit more time in the car when you're doing private inspections and stuff, I would 1 million% be calling up my photographer and asking them questions. So whenever I was stood with a photographer taking shots, I was asking them questions about stuff so that it helped me with my knowledge. I was never going to become a photographer, but I needed to know enough. In order to be able to justify it validly to my vendor. Get your minds into it. Get your minds into it. You have to understand these things more. You can't just be throwing VPA at vendors blindly, especially now. But it doesn't take that much of an effort. You just got to do it. You just got to do it. It's as simple as that. Know the stuff. Learn the stuff. Call your photographer. Call your REA rep. And find out why. Because if you can't explain it to vendors, then you won't be able to get VPA. Right now, especially. And then moving forward, everyone's going to be a bit more money conscious anyway. So all you're going to end up doing is chopping your com down to justify the VPA. More fool you. Or you're going to end up swallowing the VPA, which affects your bottom line anyway. Daniel's come up with a good point on LinkedIn. You can use VPA pay as another option. And there is lots of these sort of afterpay type systems, which are great, which are awesome. Ultimately, though, they're still going to have to pay it, right? At some point, they're still going to have to pay it. So you've got to get them feeling comfortable. VPA pay and these afterpay services are amazing. Wonderful addition to the industry, if you ask me. I really, really like their models in the main, right? But vendors are still going to be anxious. They're still going to be looking at that bill that they've got coming at the end of the show. So you got to be able to justify it. You have to understand each component. If you have got production fees, right, within your marketing literature, within your VPA structures, you have to understand what that entails. The second that you start stuttering, you're screwed. Absolutely screwed. All right? So get your heads on and actually put the effort in to understand why each piece of marketing in your VPA is vitally important. You have to. So, for example, with professional photography, the fact of the matter is that people's attention spans are about this big. So this is what I'd say to vendors. I'm sure you will have had a look at some properties on realestate.com, for example, yourselves. The problem with that is, though, gang, and you will see this in your behavior, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor. As you put a search in, you'll come up with the list and you will instantly start scrolling, because that's the habit that humans are into now. We're all into scrolling all the time. If your first picture doesn't pop off the page and grab their attention, they are going to scroll past your home. That is why that photography is really, really crucial, because you have to make it pop off the page to stop people from scrolling past. By relating it to their behaviors when they've gone online, it gets them to truly understand why photography is important. There's a case in point. There's an example. Get them to relate their own behaviors to the situation at hand. Get them to relate themselves and what they do and how they rock so that they can get them to understand why certain things are important. Crucial. Jordan, could not agree more. I know this question was aimed at VPA during COVID, but what you're saying rings true for marketing costs at any point in time. You're spot on, mate. You're absolutely spot on. It's any time. I mean, I was operating in predominantly a blue collar area, so for me, justifying VPA was tough, very, very tough. And there's still plenty of no sell, no charge agents kicking around, especially in suburbia. So, but gang, all you're doing is screwing your bottom line. Your director needs your help with this. Otherwise, we're all going to be out of a job. All right? Learn your stuff. The IQ component of our job is nothing more than effort in learning the craft, learning the skills, learning the tools to a degree of knowledge that allows you to justify comfortably what you are proposing to vendors. It's the same as your own commission. If you're not comfortable in your own skin and understand exactly what your value proposition is, why your value is at X amount of percent, then you're either going to charge less or just keep losing. IQ, it's all about effort, gang. You're not prepared. You've got to be prepared to put the effort in order to get the output. Because otherwise, there's just no point you being around. There really isn't. I'm going to be as clear cut as that. James Bell, I agree. Epic hair. What is it with my hair? What have I done? It's a bit windswept, I know, but anyway. So, second one. And again, the key point here, the key word in all of this is perspective. Second question. Tenants are becoming increasingly tough to handle. What do I do if the landlord needs to sell? Tenants are becoming increasingly tough to handle. What do I do if the landlord needs to sell? Now, the problem is in the question, in my opinion. The problem is in the question and the way it's been asked. Tenants are becoming increasingly tough to handle? To handle? I don't know if human beings like being handled. I'm not sure that they appreciate being handled. I hope you're sort of understanding where I'm coming from here. One of the biggest fails, especially on the sales side, all right, not so much on the PM side because they have to deal with tenants day in, day out and what have you. But on the sales side, there is a big, big fail, in my opinion, across the board. And that is we treat tenants as commodities. We don't treat them as human beings. We treat them as commodities. We treat them as pieces of the property that need to leave themselves from said property. We don't treat them as the human beings that they are. Now, I understand that we have all sorts of walks of life being tenants, right? We've got lots more educated people that are renting and then investing elsewhere, right? There's lots more of that going on. But we've got to start treating them more like human beings on the sales side, right? I always used to think that they were an active part of the sale in that if I made life difficult for them, guess what was going to happen? It's just human nature to push back. And again, right now, the perspective from tenants is they're really, really super, super duper sensitive. Yeah? It's so tricky right now to handle to really sort of allow them to cope with their own emotions so that they can handle the situation. All right? Because the situation is a thing. It's not a human being. But you've got to help them to understand the situation. You have to assist them in understanding the situation. Lots of landlords right now, they might have hit a brick wall with their income. Lots of business owners that have gone to the cleaners, right? Bloody tough. But you can't be making it tougher by not treating the tenant like a human being. First thing that I always did, and that is what I implore every single agent that I work with, I implore them all to do, is call the tenant and ask for a time to catch up. Now, obviously, right now, a lot of the time it'll be over Zoom, but it needs to be face-to-face, be it virtual or in person. Because you need to firstly acknowledge that the situation's pretty crap for them. By you acknowledging that, and actually paying attention to them and listening to them, it's a very disarming and very engaging little process that you go through there in that first initial contact that you have with the tenant. And it's critical because that basically sets the path for your whole relationship one way or another. Organize a time to spend 20 minutes to half an hour listening to the tenant, empathizing with the tenant, and then look to collaborate with the tenant so that you can all move forward together. The last thing that a tenant wants is for this thing to drag out even further, for nasty letters to come their way and all that sort of crap, heightening the anxiety for them. So if you listen, empathize, and then look to collaborate. And then look, maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 might still then be right, nah, you're not coming in, I'm not having it, blah, 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 blah. And in that case, you can go forward with an understanding and a feeling within yourself that you can at least move forward appropriately by saying to the tenant, look, we are trying our best to work with you. If you're not going to work with us, we have to go down the appropriate channels. And we'd much more prefer that we didn't have to do that. Kirk, bring the PM onto the conversation between sales agents and tenants. Also, all parties need to be aware of conversations so there's no miscommunication. I completely agree. Collaboration, first thing you need to do is, obviously you'll need to go to the PM to get contact information and all that sort of stuff. So while you're there, ask them, how's things going with the tenant? Have they caused any concerns? How have they been through the process? Knowledge is power when you're going into these sorts of things. So that initial conversation with the PM, don't just go onto the database and find it, because that's rude. That, for me, that's just not courteous within the if you're working in the same team in the same office. Actually have the courtesy to go to the PM and say, look, landlord's giving us a shout, thinking about selling. Can I have the tenant details? But at the same time, I'm just wondering how things are going with the tenant. Are they on time with their payments? Have they caused any dramas? Have they been cool? Find out that sort of stuff, because that is absolutely critical when it comes to, knowledge is power when you're trying to work these situations out with tenants, all right? But for God's sake, first and foremost, treat them as human beings instead of just treating them as commodities, things. They are humans. They are people. And right now they've got plenty of right. They've got plenty of right to be pushing back a little bit. Plenty of right. Especially if they're old, if they're older, if they're in one of those, if they're one of those demographics that are more potentially prone to things like COVID and flu and all that sort of stuff. You've really got to handle them with a lot more care, guys. And yes, it might take a little bit more time at the front end, but it's going to save you a hell of a lot of time through the process. A hell of a lot of time. It's that whole thing of preparation. Yeah. You gotta put the work into preparing the way that you are going to move forward with your tenants. You have to work with them. All right. Please treat them as humans. Stop treating them as commodities. Like I said, the problems in the question. Tenants are becoming increasingly tough to handle. Don't handle them. Talk to them. Listen to them. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use them in proportion. It's just the best way, and empathize. It's just the best way to really break down those barriers without you having to justify a damn thing. The fact that they just feel listened to used to help me so much. All right? Can't stress that enough. Can't stress that enough. Stop treating them as commodities. Simple as that. All right then, gang. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to everybody's input. Really appreciate it. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Thanks so much for joining us, crew. Really appreciate your time. I know that you guys are going to be really, really busy, so I'm going to let you crack on, as am I. But for now, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and get some deals done, gang. All right, you take care, and we'll speak to you soon.